The United States is currently suffering the worst migrant crisis in its history. Millions of people are getting through the U.S.-Mexico border every year, and Biden's administration is stretched thin trying to accommodate them. In 2023, the Department of Homeland Security received a whopping 700% increase in budget for their immigration division, and the real-time costs are far worse. Everything from housing to unemployment caused by the negative impact of illegal immigration has led to the U.S. spending almost $200 billion on the issue with no hope of that slowing down. So today, you will be looking at the outcome behind this economic catastrophe and just how bad things actually are. Since Biden came into office and walked back many of Trump's immigration policies, more than 7.5 million people have trooped into the United States looking to fulfill their American dream. Since 2021, there has been a serious uptick in the rate of immigration in the U.S. More than 2 million people have crossed the border in both 2022 and 2023, making it the first time in history that has ever happened. The spike is largely motivated by the current crisis in Venezuela, with 1/3 of the population fleeing the nation in the last 8 years. But more so, people have blamed Biden's immigration policies as the main reason for the crisis. Biden, upon election into office, issued a temporary 100-day ban on deportation in 2021. He also immediately halted Trump's construction of a border wall and the travel ban from specific countries. Biden reaffirmed protection for immigrants under the DACA program and also passed a bill that would fast-track 11 million undocumented immigrants into legalized citizenship. Biden even moved to change the denomination of illegal immigrants from alien to non-citizen in immigration law. All moves that managed to neither please neither the Democrats or Republicans. But whether deliberate or not, Biden's administration has been met with record number of immigrants that is causing issues on every level for the United States, and a lot is either being spent or will need to be spent in order to recover the situation. The Biden administration has sent a request to Congress to release about $14 billion for border-related expenses. Now, obviously, this much money being pulled from thin air will no doubt affect the economy negatively. Earlier in the year, Texas earmarked $6 million to help process incoming migrants upon the expulsion of Title 42. That and the proposed $14 billion will see America's already shaky economic state worsen, as no doubt interest rates will go up, and thus inflation. And that's only addressing the economic effects of immediate administrative aid. The U.S.-Mexico border crisis has led to major problems in several other sectors. The surge in immigration comes with adverse effects on the unemployment rate and the general cost of living. It's not all bad, though. Migrant workers, both legal and illegal, have seen a 9.5% increase in their presence in the U.S. workforce compared to the measly 1.5% growth experienced by native-born Americans. Truth is, most of these migrants come into the U.S. for opportunities to work and thus willingly take up the low-income jobs. It's a two-sided coin because on one hand, these migrants feed the already tight labor market and provide sustainability for companies, but on the other hand, they majorly take up only low-income jobs and take those opportunities away from uneducated native-born Americans, as well as doing so illegally. This is especially true in the food industry. Immigrants who have obtained a work permit will often pay to borrow a friend's or stranger's credentials to sign up for food delivery apps. So, you would have people renting out their valid IDs to immigrants, and immigrants using the identity of someone else to be able to work, which is simultaneously illegal and their only choice. It doesn't stop there. Once they get the ID and sign-up covered, they then need a convenient way to be able to go around the city and actually deliver the food, something like a motorcycle or a moped, which they then have to buy or rent out illegally as well. And then, if that wasn't bad enough yet, they then drive around the city on public roads without a license, which is extremely dangerous for everybody involved. This is especially an issue in migrant-heavy cities like New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Washington. With the bulk of these immigrants willing to accept low-income jobs, it automatically means these people possess less disposable income. And since the U.S. economy relies heavily on consumer spending, the less people have to spend will inevitably lead to a spike in inflation, which will only serve to worsen the cost of living for both native-born Americans and working immigrants. It's especially terrible news for the Democrat cities who have been hit the hardest by the surge in migration. The overwhelming number of people arriving at the border cities of El Paso and Eagle Pass had already forced Texas to start loading up these migrants on buses and sending them off to Democrat cities such as Washington, New York, Chicago, Sacramento, Boston, and so on. These cities now face the challenge of catering for hundreds of thousands of migrants, and it's taking a serious hit to their financial outlook. Which brings us to perhaps the biggest issue surrounding the migrant crisis: homelessness. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has stated several times that the city has reached its full capacity. About 100,000 people have arrived at New York so far in 2023 alone, and the city has spent roughly around $2 billion to set up over 200 shelters just to house and provide basic services to these migrants. What's even scarier is that Eric Adams has estimated it's going to cost north of $12 billion to properly give aid to this people in the next 2 years, and has cried out for federal support. Already, the amount of attention the city has given to migrants has upset many of the locals, with many annoyed that taxpayers' cash is being diverted away from their own issues. Several protests have popped up all around the city, particularly in Staten Island, over the location of some of these shelters and the rising insecurity for local residents in the neighborhood. The government has demonstrated a willingness to convert parks, warehouses, hotels, airports, and even public schools into shelters for migrants as they arrive. The same is true for Chicago, who converted the historic O'Hare International Airport into a shelter to house immigrants. As it stands, both New York and Chicago, as well as many other cities, have declared a state of emergency over the current problems, and the local residents are deeply upset about their tax money being used on immigration issues rather than their own. Have you been following the border crisis closely, or perhaps you've had a personal experience to share? We're eager to hear your thoughts and experiences on the border crisis, so please share your insights and stories in the comments below. One of the biggest worries for the locals is the rising crime rate. With more and more homeless and jobless migrants coming into the city, more and more of them might be forced into organized shoplifting rings in order to survive. According to the National Retail Federation, inventory loss due to shoplifting in the U.S. amounted to $94.5 billion in 2021, and the number hasn't gone down since. This is especially a big problem in San Francisco and the wider California area. San Mateo had the highest shoplifting rate in 2022, with 347 reported incidents per 100,000 residents, a ridiculous 53% increase from 2019. San Francisco came in at a close second with 333 cases, a 24% increase from 2019. In Los Angeles, there's been about 170 retail theft incidents in the last 2 years, with many of the stolen goods ending up online on eBay or Amazon. Over in New York, theft among small business owners has risen 77% in the last 5 years to over $330 million. A lot of them claim it's a theft organization ring behind it, with it being reported that only a handful of 300 people commit thousands of retail crime. And these practices often lead to businesses and shops going out of business and shutting down, even the big ones. Lots of Targets, Walmarts, Walgreens, and other big retailers are also closing down crime-hit locations, which is bad for the overall economy. And you can learn all about just how bad it is in our video on the shoplifting crisis right here on the channel. And these problems all stem down from the failing immigration policies. So what can the government do about all this? One thing that's been suggested many times is that Congress properly reassess its decades-old immigration policies, and also that states and the nation at large be able to reject new immigrants until they're filed for asylum. The Biden administration really needs to do something about it, because it is a problem area that is single-handedly dealing damage to his re-election campaign. The current policies have been tagged as too relaxed and is upsetting both the Democrats and the Republicans. Biden authorized the recommencement of the border wall started up by Trump after initially stating in 2021 that he would not build another foot of it. Many has also questioned his $14 billion proposition to address the financial crisis surrounding immigration, as it is buried within a larger $100 billion request to fund America's support for Ukraine and Israel in their respective ongoing conflicts. Regardless, many government officials have maintained that immigration is more so a policy problem than it is a financial problem, although everything we've covered in this video points to it being both. The one thing that's pretty clear at the moment is that immigration is dealing significant damage to the finances of America, perhaps the painful bill that the United States has to pay for its reckless immigration policies.